Have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried in the walls of an old house? What if the past refuses to stay hidden, and the truth demands to be uncovered? Before we dive into this chilling tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy stories that send shivers down your spine. Now, let's step into the shadows and uncover the mystery of the buried secret. The old house stood at the end of a winding, overgrown driveway, its once grand facade now crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. The windows were dark, like empty eye sockets staring out into the world, and the front door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. It was the kind of place that seemed to breathe, its very walls whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. For Emily, it was the perfect fresh start, or so she had thought. She had bought the house on a whim, drawn to its eerie charm and the promise of solitude. After the chaos of the past few years, her divorce, the loss of her job, the constant noise of the city, she craved quiet. A place to reset, to rebuild. But as she stepped inside for the first time, the air felt heavy, as if the house itself was resisting her presence. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet and a chill crept up her spine. Despite the warmth of the summer afternoon, the real estate agent had been vague about the house's history. "It's been vacant for a while," she'd said, her tone carefully neutral. "But it's got good bones. Just needs a little love." Emily hadn't pressed for details. She didn't want to know. Ignorance, she told herself, was better than dwelling on the past. But the house had other plans. The first night was uneventful, though sleep came fitfully. Emily chalked it up to the unfamiliar surroundings and the weight of her own thoughts. But as the days passed, the house began to reveal itself in small, unsettling ways. There were sounds, faint, but unmistakable, that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The soft creak of a door opening, the distant echo of footsteps, the low hum of a voice she couldn't quite make out. She told herself it was the wind, the settling of the old structure, her imagination running wild. But deep down, she knew it was something more. Then there were the smells. Faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing day. A metallic tang, like rust or blood, that lingered in the air no matter how much she cleaned. And beneath it, something sweet and cloying, like decay masked by perfume. It made her stomach turn, but she couldn't find the source. It was as if the house itself was rotting from the inside out. The first real incident happened a week after she moved in. Emily was in the kitchen, unpacking a box of dishes, when she heard it, a loud, unmistakable thud from upstairs. Her heart leapt into her throat, and she froze, listening. The sound came again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of something being dragged across the floor. She grabbed a knife from the counter and crept upstairs, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The hallway was empty, the doors to the bedrooms closed. But as she approached the master bedroom, she noticed something strange. The door, which she had left open, was now shut. She reached for the handle, her hand trembling, and pushed it open. The room was empty, just as she had left it. But the air felt different, heavier, colder. And there, in the center of the floor, was a single, dusty footprint. Too large to be hers. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. The creaks, the groans, the faint hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. And then, just as she was beginning to drift off, she heard it, a voice. Soft, almost a whisper, but clear enough to make out the words, "Find me." She sat bolt upright, her heart pounding. The voice had come from right beside her, so close she could almost feel the breath on her ear. But the room was empty. She turned on the light, her hands shaking, and searched every corner. Nothing. She told herself it was a dream, a trick of her exhausted mind. But the voice stayed with her, echoing in her thoughts. The next morning, Emily decided to explore the house more thoroughly. If there was something, or someone, lurking in the shadows, she needed to know. She started in the basement, a dark, damp space that smelled of mildew and earth. The walls were lined with shelves, cluttered with old jars, tools, and boxes. As she sifted through the debris, she found something that made her blood run cold, a stack of newspapers, yellowed with age, their headlines screaming in bold black letters, ***, local family murdered in grisly slaying. Police baffled by brutal crime. Suspect never found. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the papers, her eyes scanning the articles. The murders had taken place over 30 years ago, in this very house. A family of 4, parents and 2 children, had been brutally killed, their bodies left in the basement. The case had gone cold, the killer never identified. And now, she was living in the house where it had happened. As the days passed, the house seemed to come alive. The sounds grew louder, more frequent. The smells became unbearable. And the voice, always the voice, whispering in her ear, urging her to find me. Emily tried to ignore it, to convince herself it was all in her head. But the past refused to stay buried. One night, she woke to the sound of crying. Soft, pitiful sobs that seemed to come from the hallway. She grabbed her flashlight and followed the sound, her heart pounding in her chest. It led her to the attic, a cramped, dusty space she hadn't yet explored. The crying grew louder as she climbed the stairs, and when she reached the top, she saw it, a small, shadowy figure huddled in the corner, her breath caught in her throat. The figure was a child, no older than 6 or 7, their face hidden in the darkness. They were rocking back and forth, their sobs echoing through the attic. Emily took a step closer, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Hey," she said softly. "It's okay. I'm here." The figure stopped rocking and looked up. Emily's stomach dropped. The child's face was pale, their eyes hollow and black. And then, in a voice that was not their own, they spoke, "Find me." Emily stumbled back, nearly falling down the stairs. She fled the attic, slamming the door behind her, and didn't stop until she was back in her bedroom, the door locked. She spent the rest of the night sitting on the bed, clutching a knife, her eyes fixed on the door. But the voice didn't return. Not that night. The next morning, she called a local historian, a man named Mr. Grayson who specialized in the town's darker history. He agreed to meet her at the house, and when he arrived, he took one look at the place and sighed. "I was wondering when someone would buy this old place," he said, his tone grim. "It's got quite the history." Emily led him inside, her hands still shaking. She showed him the newspapers she'd found, told him about the voice, the figure in the attic. He listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. "The murders were never solved," he said finally. "But there were rumors. Some said the father did it, that he snapped and killed his family before turning the knife on himself. Others said it was an outsider, someone who'd been staying with them. But the truth, well, the truth is worse." Emily's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" Mr. Grayson hesitated, then reached into his bag and pulled out an old photograph. It was of the family, the parents and 2 children, smiling as if they didn't have a care in the world. But something about it made Emily's skin crawl. "There was a 3rd child," Mr. Grayson said quietly. "A little girl. She disappeared the night of the murders. No one ever found her." Emily stared at the photo, her mind racing. The figure in the attic, the crying child. Was it her? Was she the one who had been whispering, begging to be found? That night, Emily returned to the attic. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the voice was louder now, more insistent. "Find me. Please." She followed the sound to a corner of the attic, where the floorboards were warped and splintered. Using a crowbar, she pried them up, her hands trembling. Beneath the floor was a small, hidden compartment. And inside, wrapped in a tattered blanket, was a tiny skeleton. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The child, the missing girl, had been here all along. Buried beneath the floor, forgotten by the world. And now, her spirit was trapped, unable to move on. The voice stopped after that. The smells faded, the sound ceased. But the house still felt heavy, as if it was holding its breath. Emily knew she couldn't stay. The past had been unearthed, but it would never truly be laid to rest. As she packed her bags and prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching her, its empty windows following her every move, and as she drove away, she swore she heard the voice one last time, faint but clear, "Thank you." But whether it was gratitude or a warning, she couldn't say. If you enjoyed this spine-tingling tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more stories that will keep you up at night. And remember, sometimes, the past isn't as buried as we think. What secrets are hiding in the shadows of your world? Let us know in the comments below. Ghost.